Everyone in the house realizes there are just seasons, moments, when you can experience a kind of dullness of soul, a kind of exhaustion, absence of enthusiasm that can sometimes have you questioning your very existence, sometimes God's love. To be human means you pass through seasons and moments like this. I know it's popular for people in my position to somehow give the impression that there is a S on their chest and that somehow they are always sensing the presence of the Lord, the power of the Lord. I just want to serve notice that it's not always true. That it doesn't matter whether you're from the pulpit or to the door, everybody goes through seasons in which they feel as if sometimes they have lost their edge. They don't quite have the same sharpness, the same point to living, to thinking. And I'm wondering, is there anybody here like that this morning? Have you ever gone so long, gone so strong until you've actually felt somehow that you are missing something? And there are times when it has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not you've done something wrong. Sometimes it is a part of life to get caught in the ebb and flow to such a degree where you literally lose your edge. And there's something to this text that tells us how not only to find power restored, there's something to this text that tells us what we should do to keep from flying off the handle. Something to help us grasp what it is God might want to do for us and then in us and then through us. In fact, there's a proverb, not a biblical proverb, that simply says to find out what a man is worth, take away his possessions, take away his money, take away his friends, and you'll find out exactly what he's worth. All they want to do is build a new space. They realize that the classroom is too small. In the ancient world, the prophets would meet with Elisha, and there was a school of prophets. And what they have proposed is a building program, an expansion program, an additional site that simply says, where we used to meet is too small. Now we need a larger space. That's in verse 1. One day, a group of prophets came to Elisha and told him, as you can see, this place where we meet with you is too small. Let's go down to the Jordan River, where there are plenty of logs. And there we can build a new place for us to meet. All right, he told them, go ahead. Please come with us, someone suggested. I will, he said, so he went with them. And notice when they arrived at the Jordan River, the site of the new location, someone who remains nameless in the throes and the involvement of the work of cutting down trees. There is an instrument that's lost, the iron axe head tied to the handle that would have made work easier and would have made the project smoother and its completion quicker. Notice what happens in this text. There are no prophetic words that are spoken here. There are no promises that are made here. There's no indictment. There's no judgment. All that takes place is a simple model and portrait of the mercy of God for people in the throes of needing his mercy. The axe head, as it's being utilized, is lost. In the ancient world, particularly during the Iron Age, they would find metal, file it, use it as a tool to build. The problem was in the ancient world, if you had an axe head, you were wealthy because everybody couldn't afford an axe head. They would take the iron, fasten it to a wooden handle, bind it with leather binding, soak it in water. When the leather would shrink and dry in the sun, you had an axe head that you could work with. But the more you worked with the axe, the more loose it became and made working with it impossible and sometimes made it the cause of murder. That's why I had you read Deuteronomy 19, because I wanted you to see the significance of this. This idea of working in a way that somehow can injure people because an edge has been lost. In fact, think of this, because the text tells us that as they began the work, as one of them, verse 5, was cutting the tree, his axe head fell into the river, and he said, "Oh, sir," as he cried, "it was borrowed." Verse 6 then says, "Where did it fall?" And I want to simply submit this to you, that one of the ways you can begin to keep your cutting edge, one of the ways you begin to find restored power, one of the ways you can begin to keep from flying off the handle is you've got to first be able to acknowledge that you lost something. It's possible to always go and keep moving, just maintaining a posture or keeping up with appearances or just going through the motions. But there's something about this fella that tells me he is willing to acknowledge, I know that I've lost something. And the only way you can ever find your way back to the edge that makes you effective is if you are first willing to acknowledge that I had something, but now it's gone. If you can first acknowledge that there has been something that's taken place and you recognize it is now missing, in fact, you can't get help until you get honest. Until you're willing to say to somebody, until you're willing to say to yourself, I have a problem and I can't fix it by myself. Until you're willing to reach outside of yourself and go to others and seek their help, you can't ever get back to the cutting edge. And it's not only the acknowledgement that there is something missing, there is this sense in which you have to know where you lost it. I'm one of those people who from time to time will walk out of my house without my eyeglasses on. And one of the first things I've got to do is I've got to go back to where I saw them last. You do this all the time with your car keys. Sometimes you lay your keys down. I'm just looking for the honest people. Forget glasses and forget car keys. Let's use cell phones. Let's use date books. Let's use anything you want. Here's what I want you to get. Whenever you lose something, you always go back to where you had it last in order to look for it. And when you've lost something, there is this signal that tells you to go back to the place where you had it last to begin the process of looking forward and recovery. And sometimes what you've got to do is go back to the place where you know you had it last and recognize it was lost there as you begin the process of going forward. I realize you don't understand what I'm saying. I'm saying that when you prayed more, your life was different. And you had a spiritual kind of power and strength that you no longer have. When you spent more time reading the scriptures, there was a strength that you had and a presence of God's power that you no longer have. But you know when you prayed more, read more, there was a place where you had those things happening. There was a time in which you recognized that something happened in your life. And rather than respond appropriately, you got jealous. You became envious. You became cold and critical. And since that time, you have not been able to get back on square. You know that you were doing fine until you met someone and your life changed. And now you realize that the personal sin has got you so caught up and so entangled that you can't even hear God when you want to. And you say, Williams, what do I do? Well, you go back there. You go back to the place where you know you lost it, and there begin the recognition that God, it was here that something changed. And from that vantage point, start moving forward by saying, God, you are the one alone that can help me, and I want to get back on track and restore my cutting edge. Am I making sense to anybody? You go back to that place, and you start looking there. This man is aware of what was lost. He's aware of where it was lost. In fact, the prophet raises the question and says to him, just show me where you lost it. But here's what I want to submit to you. To some degree, this could have been avoided. as I'm reading the text, I'm thinking of times I spent with my father, who was a man from the South, but who actually spent most of his time in the North. And once he had wood in the back of his house, and I would periodically in the summer go check him out and watch him chop wood. You need to know that I am completely urbanized. Wood chopping ain't in my heart. No way, shape, form, or fashion. Now, in fact, I'd like to never have to look at a wood pile if I could help it. And I like the kind of fireplaces that you click and point to. But that's a whole nother story. He was showing me how you took there was a pin, a splitter. You put it in the wood, and then his force of either the hammer or the other side of the axe would sometimes split the log, and there was a power that he exercised in breaking. He would say to me, listen, this is good exercise. If you really want some exercise, you come on and learn how to split this wood. And I would say, I want exercise, but I don't think I want it that way. I'm going to go play ball. Then there was a story that he reminded me of. I actually saw it, in which there was an older man and a younger man who were engaged in what appeared to be a day's work of chopping wood. And the young man, much younger, 20 years younger than his senior, is chopping wood at a voracious pace, sweating and clearly athletic. But the older man is sitting down every now and then. And at the end of the day, the older man has chopped more cords of wood than the younger man. And the younger man, in talking to the older man, raises the question, I don't understand it. I worked the entire day chopping. I saw you sit down several times a day. And yet, at the end of the day, you were able to finish more cords of wood than I. I don't get it. I don't understand. And the old man said, you don't understand something, son. He says, every time you saw me sit down, I was sharpening my axe. And you spent the entire day cutting with a dull blade. And so you expend more energy, but you get less done. And what I would submit to you is every now and then, in order to keep your cutting edge, you've got to learn how to sit and participate in self-examination. You see, when I look at this young man's life, what I realize is that some of this could have been avoided if he had taken the time to stop and check the condition of the axe head in relationship to the handle. He would not have lost it. And sometimes as a Christian, when you spend your time just going and never sit down and allow other people to give you a kind of exam about how you're really doing, when you never ask yourself hard questions about God, how are you and I getting along? When you never ask people around you to critique you, you can end up losing your edge and flying off the handle if you're not careful. You don't just need the testimony of those who love and like you. You need some of your critics to tell you this is where you're jacked up. And if you don't fix that, you're going to ruin not just yourself, but a whole lot of other folks. You know how I know I'm right about this? Because in the ancient world, the Deuteronomy 19 piece, it's because your axe handle, when it flies off, it doesn't just hurt you in the loss of your work and your effort, it hurts those around you. And when you lose your spiritual edge, it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts the people who are looking to you for a word from God. It hurts the children who are looking for a mother and a father to model something of the ethos of what it means to be a Christian. They hurt and you hurt others. That's why sometimes self-examination is the way you can maintain the avoidance of hurt and keep your edge by sitting down and raising hard questions about really where you are. One of the things that I've recognized is sometimes you need to make periodic repairs as you take inventory of your life. Here's why. Ain't nobody that sharp. I believe in the words of Bishop James Brown, who said, like a dull knife, barely cutting, talking loud and saying nothing. You can find yourself wearing yourself out with just a wooden handle, hitting and making no difference, hitting, having no impact, and just exhausted at the end of a day. Self-examination and the critique of other people around you, as opposed to just going through the motions, can help you keep your spiritual edge. Let me tell you why this is significant. The lad says in the text, he says the axe that he lost inside verse 5, he says it was a borrowed axe. The Hebrew says it wasn't just an axe that was asked for, it was begged for. It wasn't just borrowed, he begged to borrow it. One of the ways you can maintain an edge is if you at least recognize that everything you are and everything you have is borrowed. You don't own nothing. I know that's hard to hear because the assumption is that I have what I have or I am what I am because I worked for it. But there's a whole lot of people who are better credentialed. There are a whole lot of people less credentialed. There are a whole lot of people who worked harder. And last night they laid down and woke up this morning and have nothing. Somebody laid down last night brilliant, but they woke up this morning an imbecile. Somebody laid down last night the picture of health and fitness. And when they woke up this morning, they were paralyzed. Somebody went to bed last night rich. And when they woke up this morning, they were a pauper. Somebody had the world on a pearl last night. When they woke up this morning, it felt like the world was on them. And the truth is that everything you've got is just borrowed. Nothing we possess is ours to own. Everything we have belongs to him. It's why when we raise our children knowing that one day we've got to give an account to the real owner because we're just borrowers. It's why we treat our spouses the way we treat them, because we realize one day we've got to give an account to the owner because we're just borrowers. It's why we handle the possessions we have the way we do, because we realize that one day got to give an account because it's all just borrowed. You see, the thing that intrigues me about the narrative is that this borrowed piece, God decides to move in the situation miraculously because he realizes the injury would be to several people. You see, it's not just the person who borrowed the axe who would be in a predicament. It would be the person to whom the axe belongs, who now has been financially devastated, unable to care for their family, make a living because the tool has been lost. You know what? That's just the mercy of God. I think this is why, at least in my head, the celebration of the text has nothing to do with a judgment, nothing to do with a pronouncement, nothing to do with an indictment. All it is a passage, a narrative to point to a master, to a God who sometimes is just merciful. It's important, especially when you've blown it. He didn't take the time to examine the axe. He didn't stop to monitor its secure. He kept working. And all this is a reminder that sometimes our God has been merciful and restored stuff that he didn't have to restore. Not because we deserved it, but because he's just merciful like that. Is there anybody here who's ever been caught in a moment of mercy and you knew it was a moment of mercy? Have you ever been caught in a situation that you knew was nothing more than the mercy of God, to the degree where you couldn't get mad? All you could do was just worship and say, Lord, I thank you. All you can do is just be grateful. I'm hustling to the finish line. Listen, in 1990, just for the record, when I became pastor of New Life, I was always into sports cars. It's not a midlife crisis. I've always been into two-seaters. One day driving down Route 30, I'm coming from Eastern, where I was going to submit an application to go to school. I get down into Haverford, Bryn Mawr section, and I can see a Mac machine on the corner. I think to myself, I'm going to stop to have lunch. Maybe I should get a few dollars. But then I speak to myself and remind myself, but you have money in your pocket. I'm arguing with myself at the light, pull over to the curb, and make a decision that I still get 10 more bucks out just in case. As I go to the Mac machine and I'm standing there, I can hear people behind me screaming. I can even see a fire station that's 100 yards on my right-hand side around the corner and see the men in there running for some reason I don't know. As I turn around, I look behind me and my car is totally engulfed in flame. I remember sitting on the curb while they continued to destroy it, thinking to myself, I didn't need the money, I didn't hear a voice, but I just felt I needed to get out of the car. And given the way the car was consumed, I realized that if I had been sitting in it, even if I wasn't destroyed, I might have been badly burned somewhere. And while the rest of the community is running around frantic, I'm sitting on the curb having a Pentecostal moment, thinking that it's nothing more than the mercy of God that I've just experienced. When I called and people were saying, well, aren't you upset with the loss of the automobile? I thought to myself, when you've been in a moment of God's mercy and you've actually seen God do something that you don't need anybody else to explain, but you know that it was nobody. I'm saying to you that there are those times when nobody can make sense of a thing. There is no logic. There is no natural explanation. There is no philosophical explanation. All you know is that you have been the beneficiary of the mercy of God, and you know you don't deserve it. All you can do is just drop to your knees and say, Lord, I just thank you. I thank you that I've seen you do something that only you could do. I'm just hunting for witnesses. Anybody here that can say, I know exactly what that's like, Reverend? I've been in situations like that where I closed my eyes waiting for the crash, and God just swooped down and took me out of harm's way and raised me up. And now I give him glory because I realize that God just does things like that. That's all this text is trying to communicate, that somehow God provides moments that can't be explained. You can't explain the nature of iron rising, God not violating the laws, water, a stick being thrown in water, the molecules not being disturbed, and yet something coming to the surface. And every now and then what God will do is God will work in a miraculous way to give you a new handle, to give you a new beginning. I mean, when you think about this, the fact that Elisha throws a stick in the water says something to me about God's providence. And you say, why is that, Reverend? Because wood doesn't grow overnight. Wood has a beginning and a long process. And the stick that Elijah throws in, because this is not about Elijah's power, this is about God's power. The stick had a beginning in which God knew what that stick would be used for. And when God has given you and I a new handle in order to do and be what he calls us to be, sometimes you got to just step back and appreciate the providence of God, of knowing that if you had married who you wanted, If you had gotten the job that you wanted, if you had moved where you wanted, maybe God would not have done some of the things that providentially he's allowed you to manifest and arrive at now. And I don't want you to lose sight of the fact that it was wood. Because wood, there's another place in the Bible where some wood had the ability to help restore moral liability and failure. There's another place, Lord, I wish I had a witness, where some sticks put together help change the direction of your life and my life. That's why the old preacher said, at the cross, where I first saw the light, and the burden of my heart rolled away. It was there by grace. I received my sight, and now I'm happy all the day. I'm glad, not just for the wood tossed into the river. I'm glad for the wooden cross. And I'm glad for the one who hung on the cross that took care of my moral failure, my moral liability, and raised me, you don't hear me, raised me to a new level of living, a new level of loving, a new level of life by the grace of God that has restored and given me back my cutting edge. Why can I go through life? Because he lives. Why can I make it through the next week? Because he lives. How can I get back on my square? Because he provides the strength and the comfort and what I need to make it another further by his grace and by his glory. And it's not because I'm so sharp. It's not because you're so sharp. It's because he's merciful like that. Is there anybody that knows our God is good and his mercy endures not just for yesterday, not just for today, but I said the Lord is good and his mercy endures forever. The writer of Lamentations said, morning by morning, if it were not for the mercies of the Lord, we would be consumed. But morning by morning, new mercies I see. It's because I can't deal with Monday's mercy because I need some mercy on Sunday. And I can't live off of Tuesday's mercy because I need some mercy on Wednesday. But morning by morning, brand new, spanking brand new mercies I see. You living right now in the afterglow of mercy you just received. Because we're here today and the mercy of God is operating in the present, not just yesterday. I'm glad where you brought me from, but I'm anxious about where we're going. Is there anybody here? That's why you can maintain your cutting edge with an appreciation for the mercy of God and the restoration he can give. A commitment to self-examination that has you doing a kind of spiritual inventory and asking people, where in the world am I? How am I doing before I lose it? And an acknowledgement that I've lost it. An acknowledgement that I've left it. An acknowledgement by going back and saying, God, this is the place where we got to deal with either personal sin entanglement, deal with the prayerlessness, deal with the worship and its absence of our lives, and we can find a cutting edge all over again. Come on, stand on your feet and celebrate God as you do it.